One of the former worst agents in all of Valorant has suddenly bursted into the meta. Deadlock has become a very strong agent, but a lot of people don't know how to play her properly. So in this video, we're going to break down everything you need to know to dominate on Deadlock so that you can start to get win after win in your ranked games and abuse this new meta agent. Now, while Deadlock does fall into the Sentinel role, what exactly does she do? Because she's obviously not the same as many of the other Sentinels. Deadlock is a space denial character, capable of denying enemies' pushes, gathering information about where enemies are pushing, and overall preventing enemies from entering an area that you don't want them to enter in, at least not easily. In order to better understand exactly how to dominate with this character, we're going to go over every single one of her abilities, and then we're going to talk about 5 things you need to know, including how to play this character, just like the pros are abusing in this current meta. Now, the first ability we got to talk about is definitely Gravnet. Now, Gravnet is going to slow enemies that are hit by the Gravnet, and they have to actually remove it, very similar to SkillCapped, if they want to get the slowing effect that is forcing them to crouch off of them. Now, this is a fantastic tool to combo with many abilities, whether it's Gecko Molly, Raise Nade, or just trying to wallbang fire. If you're trying to deny someone from peeking an angle or potentially punishing someone from peeking out of Haven window on attack, you could easily throw a Gravnet and combo it with an ability or fire. It's also a really great ability to use to delay a rush, especially a burst out rush. You can use this in response to enemies using abilities to burst out in a specific area. So the enemy throws a grenade, throws a dart, or whatever that is going to indicate to you that they're about to enter the site. You Gravnet in response, and at the very least stop most of the enemies from entering site. This gives you an opportunity to get a kill and not get traded out immediately, or potentially force the enemies to completely back off and rotate, which is a huge W if you're a Sentinel user. That is like your #1 goal, to force someone to rotate off a site. Now, you can also use it dynamically in a fight. Because you're forcing enemies to crouch and move slowly, it's super easy for you to actually win the gun duel if you hit someone with this. So if you know there's an enemy there, you can bounce it off a wall and actually just slow them down, force them to crouch, swing them, and easily get that kill. Just make sure that you're actually adjusting your crosshair placement appropriate for them being crouched, but overall it's going to be a really unfair fight in your favor. But something that a lot of people don't talk about is that Deadlock is a really strong retake agent, and there's many lineups that you can use with Gravnet to actually retake space. Whether you're trying to retake a point or defuse a bomb, having Gravnet lineups can be amazing. And there are other lineups from the character as well, like lineups with Annihilation, her ultimate, and we go over all of this on the SkillCapped website with our Deadlock guide, where we're going to be breaking down exactly the lineups that pros use and show you how to use them dynamically in your games, so you can get a lot of consistent value and start clutching up in these 1v4, 1v5 scenarios, really bringing home the dub for your team. And we offer a rank improvement money back guarantee, so if you don't climb, you don't pay. That's how much we stand by our course. So check out the Deadlock course and SkillCapped in the links down below, and let's get back into the video. Now, the next ability is Sonic Sensor, and a lot of people are finding difficulty getting value out of this ability, mainly because enemies can sneak by it really easily, and you want to put it in a place where enemies are going to actually trigger the sound aspect of the sensor. This is why it's really good to use as the intro to certain sites, so that when enemies decide to full commit, it's actually going to go off and you're going to get some indication of it slightly before, so you can respond to a lot of things that are happening by either making a play that is going to mess up their rhythm or using some abilities so enemies don't slip through the cracks and they're not able to slip onto site. And especially, this is super important to have someone nearby that can actually play off of the sound sensor, whether that's you or someone on your team that is capable of taking advantage of that extra bit of information that comes a few seconds earlier and utilizing that information to make a play or set up some sort of denial. Similar to most abilities on Deadlock's kit, this is great to combine with other abilities, and especially Cypher Trip. We're seeing a lot in the meta, but we're going to talk a little bit about that later when we break down the entire meta setup with Deadlock. Now, number 3 is Barrier Mesh, probably Deadlock's most individually powerful ability, not counting her ultimate. And this is super strong because it's going to be able to deny routing from enemies, deny space, deny pushing from the enemy. But at the same time, it's not going to deny line of sight. So just because you can prevent enemies from pushing into sight, if it gives them access to open lanes, they're going to get information, they're going to be able to potentially kill y'all when other enemies enter the site. And you got to be really careful about what exactly you're denying, because sometimes line of sight is all they need. In addition to that, it's not the greatest for flanking because most of the time you're going to use it to deny a certain lane on the flank, but they're still going to get a lot of line of sight. And if you decide to rotate back and destroy your own barrier mesh, then enemies could be easily waiting right outside of that for the rotation, and it can be kind of a double-edged sword where they use your own ability against you. So in a pinch, it can be used to deny flanking, but I wouldn't say that that is its best use. Its best use is to actually deny a certain aspect of the site from enemies and know for a fact that enemies are not going to be able to be pushed up until they actually break it, which is going to give you sound indication, and be close by so that you can combine it with abilities or even a play yourself, because remember, you could still shoot through it. So if one enemy in a 1v1 or something like that is shooting it, you have a really good or great indication that you can swing them and get a free kill. So there's a lot of ways to play around barrier mesh to give you a huge leg up on your opponents. Now, once again, barrier mesh is fantastic combined with a lot of utility, especially stuff like mollies, because enemies that are close by to it trying to break it are going to all of a sudden get pushed off of it when you use some types of utility. You can even trap enemies in certain areas and then basically force them to either run out or die to a lot of combo utility. So barrier mesh is extremely powerful, but try not to use it when other abilities like Gravnet would do the same thing, because I think you're wasting a lot of potential value that it offers uniquely. And last but certainly not least, Annihilation. And Annihilation can be one of the most powerful ultimates if you use it in the right way. Grabbing enemies when you're with your team can be super powerful, because even if their team destroys it right away, the enemy is going to be stranded, and oftentimes you're going to result in a kill. So when you're stacking with teammates, it could be used a little bit more aggressively if the enemy is like jiggle peeking you hypothetically. But in addition to that, it's a really great ultimate to use when you're in a 1v2 or you're in a 1v1 scenario, of course. Being able to force enemies to take a risky duel and not allow them to fight on their terms. They have to fight on yours, where they have to peek into you. Combine that with your other pieces of utility, and you could basically put the enemy between a rock and a hard place where they don't really have a great solution no matter what. They either challenge you 1v1 and lose, and then they just lose because their teammate is dying to Annihilation, or they actually have to run into your utility and you're basically going to win no matter what. But I would make sure that you're bouncing this off of walls using lineups like we have on the SkillCapped website, or jiggle peeking with it when you're activating it so that you're not peeking the enemy and dying with no weapon out and never getting a fair fight. Now, we do need to talk about these 5 major things. If you want to master Deadlock in the meta, this is what you need to know. Number 1 is Deadlock is seeing a ton of play on Abyss. Right now, Abyss is in the map pool and a lot of players are struggling to win consistently on it, but Deadlock can do just that, especially in a double Sentinel setup. Deadlock is super strong with Cypher, and especially when you combo trips plus sound sensor, oftentimes it forces an enemy to come out, destroy the trip, only to trigger the sound sensor, which is a super powerful combo to completely lock down a site. And in general, Deadlock is a really great supplemental Sentinel. While she doesn't do everything that some of these other Sentinels do, like Killjoy and Cypher, when you combine her kit with a lot of other Sentinel abilities, it becomes even stronger. And you can even just have one Sentinel plus her on a single site and completely shut that down, so you could stack the other site with slightly more people so that they can defend it a little bit easier. Deadlock is also extremely good at punishing duelists that are a little bit too aggressive compared to the rest of their team. Characters like Jet, Raze, and Neon are going to get out in front of their team only to get stalled out or exposed by pieces of Deadlock's kit, and they're going to just be sitting ducks with no reinforcements and die really easily. But the next thing we do need to talk about with Deadlock is space control. And this one is super important to understand. Deadlock is trying to deny enemy area on the map. And one of the most powerful things that you can do as a Sentinel, especially in ranked play, I don't want to make this overly complicated, just deny a rush and force a team to rotate. This goes double for people that are underneath the platinum rank in particular. In those elos, the strategies are really simple. People will rush one site and rush another. There's a lot less defaulting, a lot less rotations, and you know from experience that most of the time when your team tries to rotate, it just doesn't work out. Some people rotate and maybe they rotate too slow and they never fully commit to the next site, or other people linger too long and die. Whatever the case may be, rotations often just completely fail, so there's a lot more full commission. And if you can just deny enemies from committing, rotating. And Deadlock is fantastic at doing that. You're going to win round after round after round. You're just denying them the ability to push. You're giving them no option besides pushing into your team where all 5 of you are finally there, or rotating off. That's what you want. You want them to rotate off. You want them to have wasted all the utility. You want them to not be on the same page anymore. This is what you can create on Deadlock, and it's going to win rounds for you by itself. Now, while a lot of people understand the power of Dual Sentinel, the number one question we get is, how do we make it so that we're not throwing on attack? How do you play Deadlock on offense? What can you do? It's actually 2 powerful things that you can do on Deadlock. Number one is making it so that once you secure that site, you can kind of fortress it down, right? You cleared the site, and then you make it so that if enemies want to retake onto the site, then they have to get through your utility, they give away their location, and it just becomes harder and harder for them to push that site. That could be a great thing to do, and you're going to do that a good amount of time. But another thing that you can actually do is try and lurk on Deadlock. And the reason that lurking on Deadlock can be really powerful is once you know relative where enemies are, you can set up little quote-unquote traps for them, whether it's a sound sensor, whether it's a barrier mesh, where enemies have to give away their position, but they're going to be rotating by themselves. So the Deadlock is going to be able to set up a counterplay against them. Imagine the enemy is trying to rotate through Haven B, and all of a sudden there's a barrier mesh there, and they don't really know what they're supposed to do. They need to break it to go forward, but they don't know if you're pushed up. They actually have no idea where you are, and there's a million different places you could play, whether it's mid yourself so that you could just follow behind them and potentially get more kills, whether it's just around the corner. There's a ton of versatility in being able to cut off sections of the map. And while I wouldn't suggest doing this every single time on attack, doing it even once and having an impactful lurk can make the enemy second guess their decisions for the rest of the game, and it's super freaking strong. Now, the last question you have to answer is Deadlock the agent for you? Deadlock has a very unique playstyle. Someone who is extremely calm under pressure, takes in every bit of information, and can quickly make decisions based on where enemies are and where enemies aren't, using utility to set up a strategic advantage for them and their team. I think a lot of people that don't traditionally play Sentinel roles would actually like aspects of Deadlock. So if you're looking for another character to play and field to, I think Deadlock is the perfect character for you to pick up, and you're definitely going to want to check out all our in-depth guides and pro breakdowns on this character in our Deadlock course on the SkillCapped website. Check it out right here. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.